And one day, I almost stabbed someone. I tried to stab him. I turned it over to God. I said, Lord, I need your help. You know, I can't really do this on my own. Please guide me and the team. You're very smart, you're very talented, but there are a lot of people who know a lot more about this than you do. And you surround yourself with those people, and you make them an integral part of your decision-making and your team.
What does it take to lead with courage, humility, and faith? Today, legendary neurosurgeon and former HUD secretary, Dr. Ben Carson, shares how true leadership begins with dependence on God. Welcome to the 11 Talents Podcast.
You really jumped into the limelight with this amazing surgery with conjoined twins. From what I've learned about it, it was a practice that had really kind of faded away a little bit, and then you kind of brought it back to the forefront, and then you have a successful surgery with conjoined twins. Can you talk a little bit about that?
It's a very difficult surgery, particularly occipital craniopicus, when they're joined at the back of the head, because the blood drains out of the head through that area. So what would typically happen is that people would exsanguinate, they would die. I actually became interested in it spontaneously. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking about all the cases that had occurred and all the disasters and why did that happen? And I concluded that it was always exsanguination or bleeding to death. I said, how could you keep that from happening? And started investigating things. I talked to the chief of cardiothoracic surgery at Hopkins. I said, you operate on the hearts of little babies. How do you keep them from bleeding out? And he told me about hypothermic arrest, where you cool the body temperature until the heart stops pump all the blood out. And you can operate for up to an hour before you have to restore the circulation without major damage to the brain. And I said, wow, what if you could do that at the critical time during one of these operations? That might actually be successful. And then I said, why am I thinking about this? I'm not going to see a set of twins like that. They're very rare. A few weeks later, there they were. Mm. And, they were exploring all the surgical sites in the world that did complex things. And so, of course, that included Johns Hopkins. And I explained to everybody what I'd been thinking about with the hypothermic arrest at the critical time. And everybody said, that sounds like it might work. We were able to put together a spectacular team, just fantastic individuals. We didn't know for sure whether it would work, but in theory, it sounded good. The biggest problem was that we only had an hour of hypothermic arrest time. And we were coming down to the very end, and we still weren't finished. And I just said, do not tell us how much time we have left. We don't need the extra pressure. If you're saying you only got 2 minutes left, just turn the blood back on when we get to an hour, and whatever will be, will be. And we finished at 59 minutes and some seconds. And we were able to turn it on and get things back together. The only real problem was the skin had shrunken. Mm. The plastic surgeons had put what we call scalp expanders in, but during the course of the 22-hour surgery, skin came back down to its normal size. So they weren't able to get it completely closed, and they used some artificial skin stuff, which unfortunately allowed an infection to get in there. But other than that, it was terrific.
Wow. So, I work with an organization that we have members that are CEOs and presidents, and, you're constantly going into board meetings to preparing for high pressure situations between deals and selling and buying companies. It only pales in comparison to, I can imagine that immense pressure that you had of 2 human lives at your fingertips. How do you deal with that stress? I mean, how do you deal with it before and then during the surgery? Are you one of those that's, got crazy music going on and distracting you so that you can kind of.
Well, I do have music going on.
Yeah.
That was something that I brought to the Johns Hopkins operating rooms. I love classical music, and the residents all knew when they came to do their pediatric neurosurgery rotation, they were also going to learn classical music.
Who's your favorite composer?
That would be Bach.
Bach. Uh-huh. Very good.
And of course, he wrote To the Glory of God, top corner of all of his pieces. It was amazing what he was able to accomplish. But as far as the pressure is concerned, my answer is always the same. I turn it over to God. I said, Lord, I need your help. You know I can't really do this on my own. And please guide me and the team. And I used to pray with my patients and the anesthesia team and everybody before operations. And I truly believe that that's why God is there, to help us. He doesn't force himself on us. But if you take advantage of the relationship, wonderful things can happen.
What do you think made you choose medicine in the first place?
As a youngster, I used to love to hear the stories about missionary doctors and how they were able to bring wonderful relief to people. And many times they put themselves in great danger to do so. And I decided when I was a kid that I would be a missionary doctor. Now, it changed over time to neurosurgery, but still with the same ideals of being able to restore people to health or to save people's lives. And I really never considered any other profession.
You talk about that reliance on faith, and that doesn't come from nowhere. I mean, it's instilled in you, I'm guessing. Tell us, who gave you that faith?
It was my mother, who had a very difficult upbringing, dire poverty, never had a place she could really call home, less than a third grade education. Married at age 13, found out that her husband was a bigamist. If anybody had an excuse, it was her, but she never accepted excuses for herself or from us. And she had tremendous faith in God. And she believed that he was the answer to all problems. I grew up with a praying mom. And, you know, we all prayed together. And I never lost that. You know, it solidified over the course of time. I had more experiences that led me to understand that God was not just a concept, he was real. And that had a lot to do with some of the cases that I would do that other people wouldn't consider, because I figured it was more than just me.
So you did surgeries on the conjoined twins, but I also read that you eventually did in utero surgeries. Can you talk us through? I mean, obviously you just met my youngest, and sometimes it's hard, very hard for me, not being a medical person, but to think about something so vulnerable and precious inside the womb, and something so tiny, but yet doctors like you can go in there and operate on a baby. And anyways, I want to get more into that.
Well, you recognize that this is not a meaningless bunch of cells like a lot of people try to say.
Yeah.
Because when's the last time you saw a meaningless bunch of cells develop eye sockets and fingers and feet and start moving and have a heartbeat? Obviously, it's a human being.
Yeah.
And, you know, sometimes we would operate on babies that were 25, 26, 27, 28 weeks gestation, very premature. But there was no intrauterine surgery. It was an aspiration. And, you know, I had an obstetrician who came to me and he said, I know you do unusual things.
It's always, I'm sure, a scary start to a conversation.
That's right. And he said, I have this woman, and she's pregnant with twins, and one of the twins has a severe case of hydrocephalus. The head is expanding so rapidly, it's going to put her into premature labor, and both twins are going to be lost because their lungs are so immature that even with maximum support, we won't be able to keep them alive. He said, do you think you could figure out a way to operate on the hydrocephalic twin so that we could save the normal twin? You know, there had been an article in the New England Journal of Medicine about intrauterine surgery saying that it's a lofty goal and that it is something we'll be able to do in the future. But these babies didn't need the future, they need it now. And to figure out what could we possibly do. And I knew of a pediatric neurosurgeon in Philadelphia who was experimenting on intrauterine surgery in sheep. So I contacted him and I said, do you think we could modify the procedure you're doing to make it appropriate for human beings in a week?
Rushed.
Well, that seemed like a lofty goal, but we got it done. And then the Johns Hopkins said, we can't do that here. The ethics committee said, that's beyond the pale. We can't do that. So I went to one of the community hospitals that didn't have an ethics committee, and we did the operation. And you could see the head shrink on the ultrasound. And it brought several more weeks of gestation. The lungs were mature enough, they were delivered. It was a big national story. But then there was blowback. That was cavalier, that was unethical, you shouldn't have done that. Until it became clear that not only was the normal baby okay, but the hydrocephalic baby was okay. And then they were all saying, well, yeah, I would have done that too under those circumstances. But that's not the end of the story. Many years later, Candy was at a banquet, and this beautiful, statuesque, poised young woman came up to her and said, are you Dr. Ben Carson's wife? And she said, yes. And she said, he operated on me and my twin sister while we were still in our mother's womb.
Oh, my gosh.
So God has a plan and a purpose for all of those babies in the womb.
Where do you start with weighing ethical decisions in your mind? I mean,
I think the Lord gives us experiences. The question is, do we have our eyes and our ears open? Do we learn from them? I have never been a fan of abortion, even having grown up in very liberal environments. But also as a result of growing up in those environments, I didn't believe that you could say anything about what somebody else does with their body. So I said, I personally wouldn't recommend an abortion, but I don't have any right to tell anybody else what they should do. But then one day I was thinking about slavery. And, you know, slave owners felt they could do anything they want to a slave, kill them, beat them, rape them, whatever. Very much like some of these pregnant women feel about the baby. And I said, what if the abolitionist had said, no, I don't believe in slavery, but I don't have any right to say anything to anybody else? Where would we be as a country? So you couple that with Proverbs 24:11 and 12, which says, what about those who are about to be killed, the innocent ones? Did you do anything? Did you say anything? And does not God know what you did or said, and will he not hold you responsible? That's pretty blatant. And so that's how I changed. And I went from being pro-choice to being pro-life.
What do you think goes through doctors' heads that do perform abortions, that are in it, seeing the same things that you see, seeing these babies move, seeing the God's creation and like how everything is put together so purposefully. And then they go in and perform an abortion. I mean, are they ignoring their conscience, or are they
I've wondered about it. How can you take the Hippocratic Oath and engage in murder, which is basically what it is?
Mm-hmm.
They have a strong sense of rationalization and repression because particularly in a later term abortion where you can't suck it up with a tube, you actually reach into the uterus with a forceps and you grab whatever you can grab and you pull and twist and out comes a foot, out comes a shoulder. They have to get all of it out. They have a tray that they put all the pieces because you have to then kind of reassemble it like a puzzle to make sure you haven't left something in there. That's pretty awful. It's gross, to be honest with you. Now we're at a place where about 63% of abortions are chemical abortions. They give one chemical to decrease the nourishment to the baby, and then they give a second chemical to cause the endometrium to slough off and the uterus to contract, to expel whatever is in there. It's kind of gross, too, when you think about it. And a lot of women think that they can just do this, and they end up in pretty serious condition. It really should be supervised and managed. It shouldn't be done at all, to be honest with you. But
I mean, you're basically, it's euthanizing babies.
Right. And, we like to talk about ancient civilizations and how barbaric they were. They would sacrifice children, and how could anybody be such a heathen? Are we any better, quite frankly, with what we do? And at least they valued their sacrifice. This was to appease their gods. So they obviously wouldn't try to appease them with something they didn't think was valuable.
Yeah.
So we may be worse than they are.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned Proverbs, and I think Proverbs was a big turning point for you.
Major league.
Can you tell us why Proverbs had such an impact on you and what led you to Proverbs?
Well, I sometimes had a bad temper when I was young, and I would react violently to people. And one day I almost stabbed someone. I tried to stab him. Unfortunately, he had a large metal belt buckle on under his clothing, and a knife blade struck with such force that it broke. But of course, he fled in terror.
Providential moment there, right?
But I was actually more terrified than he was, because I realized I was totally out of control. I managed to turn things around academically. I was a straight A student, but I locked myself in the bathroom and started contemplating. I said, "You're never going to be a doctor with a temper like that. Your choices are going to be jail, reform school, or the grave." None of those interested me. And, I picked up a Bible and turned it to the Book of Proverbs. And there were all these verses about anger. Like Proverbs 19:19, it says, there's no point getting an angry man out of trouble because he's just going to get right back into it. But there were a lot of positive verses like Proverbs 16:32, mightier is the man who can control his temper than the man who can conquer a city. Verse after verse, chapter after chapter. And I prayed. I said, Lord, if you don't manage this temper, I will never be able to do what I think you want me to do. And what I want to do is to become a doctor. And right there in the bathroom, he revealed to me that the reason I was angry is because I was selfish. Because it was always about me, my, and I. Somebody did this to me. I want that. Somebody's in my space. And if you could just learn to take yourself out of the center of the circle and put somebody else there, you won't be angry. That was the last time I had an angry outburst. Mm. And people say, you just learn to cover it up. But when God fixes a problem, he doesn't do a paint job. He fixes it from the inside. Mm. And it's very, very difficult to make me angry. Yeah. Probably candy's the only one who can make me angry.
So, I mean, I imagine, though, someone planted that seed, because just having that inclination to open a Proverbs, I mean, that's, I'm not quite sure if I was in your situation, that would be the first place I look. Who planted that seed for you?
God did. Well, you know, I say God actually has a sense of humor. And why do I say that? Because from that day forward, I start every day and I end every day reading from the Book of Proverbs, who was written by, as you know, Solomon. Mm-hmm. My middle name is Solomon. Now, how did he know I was going to have that affinity? But when Solomon became the king of Israel, do you remember the first thing he did that brought him great fame? There were two women claiming to be the mother of the same baby. What did he advocate? Divide the babies. Well, when I separated babies, that's when I became very well known too.
Wow.
He's got a sense of humor.
He does. He does. Let's fast forward a little bit. 2013, you gave a speech, I think, at a national prayer breakfast.
Right.
You used that opportunity. I mean, it highlighted your faith. I don't think it was intentional, but President Barack Obama was in the audience, right?
Yeah, he was right there on the stage with me. But it really wasn't about him. You know, some people got upset. Some of the senators said to me, I could never vote for anything that you want to do because of that speech. And I said to them, if it doesn't apply to you, why would you be angry?
Pretty commonsensical. I mean,
they really didn't have a response to that. But, you know, I was shocked when I was asked to give that speech because I'd given the presidential prayer breakfast speech in 1997 when Clinton was president. Okay. And I wasn't aware that anyone ever did it twice. But some research revealed that there was one person who did it twice. That was Billy Graham.
Wow.
And I said, that's pretty good company.
That's a great company, great honor.
And I didn't know what I was going to talk about. But after that speech, everybody was saying, you should run for president. Yeah. And I said, these people are crazy. I said, if I just ignore them, it'll go away. But it didn't go away. Every place I went, there were people with placards. Run, Ben, run. I had more than 500,000 petitions in my office. It was ridiculous. So finally I said, Lord, if you really want me to run, you have to give me all the things that a person who runs for president has. A Rolodex with all the important names, an organization, a lot of money. And I said, I'm not going to go out and develop those things, so you'll just have to give them to me. Next thing I knew, they were all there. Our organization was raising more money per month than the RNC. It was incredible. But I got a chance to travel all over the country. And one of the things that was thrilling was to recognize that our people in the smallest little hamlets and in the biggest cities generally have common sense. What they don't have is courage. And that's what was going to be needed to save our country. Because you can't be the land of the free if you're not the home of the brave. You got to be willing to stand up for what you believe in. And I think we're marching in that direction. I really see a revival coming to our country.
Yeah. Do you think it was Donald Trump's business experience running organizations and with his life on the line that set him apart from the other candidates in 2016?
I think the business acumen had a lot to do with it. But also he's got a New York, Manhattan businessman's personality.
Not just pinstripe suits.
No.
That's what you're...
Dog eat dog. But you got to be sort of that way to succeed in the real estate market in Manhattan. Yeah. But that also taught him how to negotiate and how to get things done and how to utilize other people. And he's a pretty amazing individual. You know, I've gotten to know him quite well. And I asked him not too long ago, I said, most people your age are sitting on the porch in a rocking chair. Here you are, your second time as president of the United States. I said, where do you get all this energy from? And he said, it's God.
Now, he said that to you recently. If you had asked him that question in 2016, do you think his answer would have been the same?
No, I don't think so. I think what happened in Butler, PA, made a major impression on him. And he realizes that he is part of the plan.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned your wife, Candy, earlier. And I have to imagine a huge part of who you are is because of the support that you and she give each other.
Absolutely.
Can you talk a little bit about what marriage means to you and having a faith partner?
I couldn't have done it without somebody that I can count on through thick and thin at all times. That person is Candy. You know, when I was 21, a senior at Yale, I said to the Lord, it's time for me to stop resisting relationships, because I don't want to have a relationship going through medical school or anything that could interfere. And I said, that's foolishness. I said, I need to have a good wife. And I said, so the next relationship, I will not resist in any way. So please make sure it's the right person. And it was. And, we've been married for 50 years now.
Wow.
And,
congratulations.
It's very important. I tell people to marry somebody that you like, somebody that you have fun with. And you'll see if you spend a little time with Candy that's who she is. Everybody asks me after they've met her, where's Candy? Even in the airports, if I go someplace by myself, the attendants are saying, where's Candy?
They refer to you as Candy's husband now, not vice versa.
Sometimes.
Yeah. That's beautiful. You mentioned you came from a broken family, so you didn't have that immediate mentor of a father figure that you could really lean on and say, this is who I want to become. So who did you look to?
Well, my mother played both roles, but she was very conscious of the fact that boys need male role models. Mm. So whenever she met somebody who was a really good role model, she tried to have us meet them and have a relationship with them. And it was a very helpful thing to do. And she also pointed out the bad guys and what made them bad. And I always said, don't ever become like that person.
I imagine being a doctor, a neurosurgeon, you spent many, many nights, many days away from the house. I do often, and a lot of our members are traveling and lead busy lives. What was your key to success for continuing to be that father figure and that male role model that you wanted to have your kids have that you did not have?
Well, I remember very much what it was like not having a father at home. And in those days, that was not so common as it is now. So I made a very intentional decision. I was traveling a lot. I was giving a lot of speeches, and I was operating like crazy. I would require my whole family go with me when I went somewhere. So all the kids had frequent flyer cards for every airline. Got to travel all over the place. The three boys, Candy, and my mother. And was able to really bond with them at that point. Otherwise, they would have been saying to their mother, that strange guy was here again last night. I didn't want that kind of situation to occur.
So in 2016, you put your nomination behind Donald Trump. You ultimately become Secretary of Housing and Urban Development. To me, as an outsider, it seems like quite a shift from going from the surgery room to now running a multi-billion-dollar organization.
Yeah.
What's going through your head, and how do you catch yourself up on the MBA or the leadership training that you needed to run that successfully?
Well, you recognize that you're very smart, you're very talented, but there are a lot of people who know a lot more about this than you do. And you surround yourself with those people, and you make them an integral part of your decision-making and your team so that you can take advantage of what they have to offer. And I tried to do that even with some of the career people, the people who'd been there for 20 or 30 years, who are just waiting for the next administration usually. Get them involved on the ground floor of some of the plans that you have. And it worked. You know, a lot of the things that we established stayed through the next administration because the careers felt some ownership of it. And, you know, I am a very nonpartisan person. You know, people are people. And it's so important that we get the American people to realize that we are not each other's enemies. Mm-hmm. That is a ploy for those who want to destroy this country. Jesus said it himself, a house divided against itself cannot stand. Mm. Abraham Lincoln repeated it, and it's absolutely true. And, you know, we have to get our people to understand that just because somebody disagrees with you doesn't make them your enemy. And you can actually learn a lot more from people who disagree with you than somebody who agrees with you on everything. Mm-hmm. And we need to just learn how to talk it out and put the facts in the middle of the table and work out solutions that include the facts and let us live, you know, peacefully with each other. That's the only solution for us. Yeah.
Do you think the key to leadership, kind of going off of what you said, is that you first have to be humble and then surround yourself with smart people, and it's that simple?
Well, you know, Proverbs 22:4 says, with humility and the fear of the Lord are riches and honor and life. Absolutely. Mm. There's no question that that's true.
So running a huge organization like HUD and working in the government with as many people as you did, I mean, you are coming across people and people are working for you that comes from all different walks of life. And I mean, that's got to be a very difficult thing to manage when you have people that are Christian, non-Christian, black, white, pro-abortion, anti-abortion. I mean, you run the gamut of everything. And no, as you said, like, it comes down to the humanity of everybody, you know?
Courage also. You have to be willing to state your beliefs and stand behind them, but you don't have to do it in a nasty manner. And, you know, I had some pretty contentious encounters with members of Congress and some of the hearings. And I never raised my voice with them or got angry, but just laid out logic and common sense. And I would always say to them, do you have a better solution? Of course, they never did. Mm-hmm. But, you know, Jesus sometimes had contentious situations mm-hmm. to occur. The very biggest contentious one, he got crucified. Mm-hmm. I don't worry about stuff like that because even if you are persecuted and have bad things said about you, even if you are tortured and killed, what is that against the backdrop of eternity? Yeah. Nothing.
If you could go back and take your 25-year-old self, what advice or what would you tell your 25-year-old self?
I would say self. Learn how you learn. Everybody learns differently. And the sooner you learn how you learn, the much faster you will accumulate knowledge and know-how for what you're going to do. But a lot of people, instead of learning how they learn, they mold themselves after someone else. unless that someone else is Jesus Christ, it's not your mold.
Yeah.
You need to get, and everybody, I like to say, is better at something than everybody else in the room. You need to find out, what is your thing? Yeah. As it says in Jeremiah 1:5, I knew you before you were put together in your mother's womb. I have a plan for you. Yeah. And boy, if we could just get in contact with him and that plan, think what could happen.
Let go and let God.
Exactly.
Right? Dr. Ben Carson, thank you so much for your time and your insight and sharing your story.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.